Good evening, everybody. I think it's a pleasure being here in front of all of you. I'm going to show you some videos from India and the kind of work that we're doing in India. And I do want to mention over here that I'm a little nervous because I've got very senior people in front of me and they have years of experience in the field. I'm pretty new in comparison to them, but I hope they will also be glad to see what we are doing in India. The topic that we decided that we're going to talk about is an introduction to verbal behavior, and the presentation that that I'm doing is based on the work of B.F. Skinner, Mark Sundberg, and Jack Michael, and I'll tell you why I've mentioned those two names along with B.F. Skinner's. And I surely want to thank Dr. Carbone and Dr. Pat McGreevy, under whose guidance I learned verbal behavior and I started with it. My presentation will focus on Skinner's verbal operants and its application in the development of language intervention programs with children with autism. And it is very, very clear that verbal behavior should not be at any point taken as a separate, branch of applied behavior analysis. Verbal behavior is part of applied behavior analysis. It's just that the way it was written and the terminology that was used over there was a little different, and it just makes it much more simpler for us to work. When I started working with kids with autism, I used to do what everybody was doing, working on receptive language, working on expressive language, till I got introduced to verbal behavior, and then at least in my head, I became much more clearer in planning my programs and in teaching language to children with autism. Verbal behavior is based on B.F. Skinner's book written in 1957. And this was a long time back, and the book was a very, very difficult book to read. Why is it slipping? Is it on a timer? I don't know. In 1998, Sundberg and Partington actually rewrote, took the terminology from there and made it simpler for most of us to read and understand the terminology, and it was specifically written to target children with autism. Going back to verbal behavior, according to verbal behavior, language is a behavior which is primarily influenced through reinforcement and maintained by motivational operations. We will be discussing this as we go on. Behavior is really anything, according to applied behavior analysis, it is anything that we do or say. So, communication and language is also behavior, and considering that communication requires two people, it requires a listener, it requires a speaker, and we cannot have communication unless it is socially mediated. So verbal behavior is something which requires social mediation from two people or more. According to verbal behavior, Skinner provided a conceptual framework and a taxonomy for controlling variables of language. And he mentioned that language is based on environmental contingencies, and there are factors in the environment, antecedents in the environment, which lead to us using language and speech. And when we use a word, then we are not just using the word because we have to say it, but there is a reason why we use that particular word. And that is where the whole classification was based on. If we look at the current language programs or traditional language programs, then they had two parts to it. One was receptive language and expressive language. But when we look at how verbal operants and verbal behavior classified the language, how Skinner classified the language, it had receptive on one side, but for expressive it had man, stags, intraverbals, echoics, textual, autoclitics as various units of language. So when we are looking at language, then we had the man, which was based on establishing operations, which were based on deprivation of something. When we want something, we use language. We don't use language for the sake of using language. Or we want something to be removed and there is an aversive situation, we use language at that time. Other than that, we are always responding to stimuli from the environment. And the stimuli could be a question that somebody asks us, or it could be, I don't know why it's slipping. or it could be somebody saying something, somebody narrating something to which we respond. So there are different antecedent controls which, this one? Okay, let me try. So there are different antecedent controls which lead us to use language. And when we are teaching children with autism language, we need to, if we understand what are the antecedents which we need to manipulate or we need to engineer or contrive to evoke language, we would be able to teach them many more aspects of the language. So the most basic unit that Skinner talked about was a verbal operant, and the verbal operant is the smallest unit of language. So when we're looking at expressive language, it's like this whole thing which includes tags, which includes intraverbals, which includes echoics, autoclitics and other things. So, oh, it is still slipping. So verbal operant is the smallest unit where when we are teaching a child to increase his language, we work around those operands, those smallest units, and work on increasing the child's language. So what I will do here is I will go through each operand and I'm going to show you videos. I hope the videos work. We've tried to link them. Thanks, Neil. And I'll show you how we are using and how we are contriving situations to teach language to children with autism. The first and the most important starting of language begins with a mand. Mand comes from the word demand. For any child, for any little baby, when he wants something, what does he do? He will cry, he will look at his mama, he will reach out for things. Okay. When we go to different places where we cannot communicate, what do? We use sign language to communicate. So communication really begins from wanting to say, I want something from you. I want something from the environment. And when we plan a verbal behavior program, when we plan a language intervention program, we begin with the mand. So a request for something desired, like an item, like an action, like an activity, like manding for information, all begins with wanting something from somebody else. So if you're thirsty, that provokes you to ask for a drink. So you have a need for asking for a drink, so you will say water. And the moment you say water, you get what you want. So the chances of you using the language again and again, asking for something, becomes higher. So language development over here begins with the need, with the individual wanting something, and that's why it benefits the speaker. So the reinforcer here is getting the item that you really want. I would like to show you a video over here. Let me see if I can get this on. No, this was a video I wanted to show you. This is a little baby who came into therapy and all he did was cried. Now what is crying? Crying is a defective mand. I want something, but I don't know how to ask for it, so I'm going to cry. And this little boy, if you saw this video, he is about 2.5 and he's crying and screaming and he's looking at the trainer who's holding something in the hand. And if you look at that, you really can't make out why he's crying, but the real reason why he's crying is he doesn't want his reinforcers or the items that he wants to be held by anybody else. Even his mom cannot hold the milk bottle and give it to him. She had to keep it on the table and he would pick it up himself. So here, the trainer was actually sitting with a milk bottle, with a pack of milk, Tetra pack of milk, and he was crying because he didn't want her to touch it. So if he had language, he would have said, don't touch my things. But he didn't have any language, so he was crying. Starting from there, the same child in the next video has, through man training, developed some speech. Now, let me see, how do I start this? I don't have video. I don't have audio. So that was the first man that we have from this child, where we are working on things that he requires. So his reinforcers are kept in view. He reaches out, and when he reaches out, then he is given the word, because he can now echo, so he is echoing an approximation of what he really wants. This is a man. I'm going to give you quite a few examples of mans, because many times when we talk about man training, we find that people just do I want this and I want that, and kind of just ends there. So I thought I'll show you a variety of examples of how to work on mans. Another area of man training could be manding for other people to do an action. So when the child wants you to open a cupboard or wants you to open a door, and you teach the child to say open, you are again doing man training, because there is a need for the child to ask you to do something. I'll show you two videos over here. I think the only way I can do this is, so we have created a condition over here where he is already on the swing, he's enjoying it, and then you stop the swing. So you create a condition where the child wants to continue with the swinging, and you teach the child to say, push me. So that's how. So begin with signs for him to communicate, and he is communicating there and asking you to do push. I'll show you another video over here. So what you see here is a number of situations that the trainer has tried to contrive to teach the child language and to increase the repertoire of vocabulary that the child has. It's not just about I want phone, it is about move your hand, increase the volume, there are so many other things that you can maybe teach there to ask for as far as developing the language. The video is completely focusing on man training. There is no other operant, verbal operant over here that you see being practiced. Coming back to my presentation. So when we are doing man training, other than manding for items, manding for activities, and other people to do an action, we can also teach the child to man for attention. So many times kids would come down, they will pull your hand, they want something. So what are they really trying to say? They're trying to say, come with me. Or they're trying to say, look at me. Or they might want to say, look what I've done, see this. So these are the words that needs to be taught. And we need to look at what is the motivating operation in place over there. What is the word that the child would use if he had language, and we had to provide the right word over there for the child to speak. This is basic level of man training. Now I would move to the I'll show you a video here. It's a beautiful video of a mother who's working at home on contriving situations. Because if we look at our children, when they're doing man training, they're just reaching out to things. And if you look at a home scenario or a school scenario, the child will just go reach out and pick up the thing. Doesn't need to talk. He's independent. He can just take his things. So we need to contrive situations to teach mans. And how the contriving is done, how do you engineer those situations? I just thought I'd show you lots of videos on those. So this is a mother who's working, and there is a pre and a post. So she's beginning with a little boy who doesn't have language, and she's contriving situations. Sometimes she's successful, sometimes she's not successful. And then later when he has speech, how she continues to contrive the situation when he has speech. So I want to show both the videos over here. This is the sign for turn, actually this is the sign for turn page, because he's a little baby, he's been taught this as a sign for turn page. And there's another sign that he uses by putting his hand on his chest. These are the two signs that you will see over here, so just observe carefully. So you can see how she's trying to contrive a situation. It's not just about the book, it's about, she tried to put the music so he can ask for something else, they can do something else, and he can learn not just one word or overgeneralize one word, but work across various things that he might need. So she's trying to contrive a situation, but he's not interested in that music. So she picks up his favorite car, he's not interested in the car. And then he reaches out once again for another book. So it's back to, so then she got a different man for a book. So the parent is contriving situation over here to teach man, and while she is doing that, if you see how she's using her clicker, that is about applied behavior analysis. She's taking data on how many times the child is asking, how many times he's reaching out for things, so that at the end of the day, she can discuss with her consultant and say, okay, listen, I'm trying so many times to teach Mans, but his speech is still not coming. What do I do? Do I need to work more? Do we need to change the strategy? Do we need to do something different? So she's taking data over there and continuing to work on man training. Now the same child, this is April. He started with therapy in February. April, you can see still speech has not come. And then this is July. Suddenly in July, there was this huge exodus of speech, and suddenly everything came. So another example of man training where she continues to contrive situations for him to use different words. If you can see that there isn't much use of the word, what do you want? So we don't want the child to become dependent on somebody else initiating language and asking what do you want. Man training is about being able to understand when you need something and spontaneously ask for something. So we are trying to create a situation where the child spontaneously asks the moment he has a need. But when he is not asking, then the trainer does, or the teacher does ask, what do you want? So that the child knows how to respond to somebody asking him, what do you want also. So we have these different examples where we are trying to contrive situations for teaching Mans, which are once again, I would say, at a much basic level. Now, the next, I'm not putting it on slideshow because then it starts slipping. The next level of man training actually goes to teaching the child to ask for information. And here you teach the child to ask for where questions, why questions, who questions, which questions, etc. And most of the time you need to contrive situations to teach these this language, advanced Mans also. So for example, suppose you want to teach a child to ask a where question. A good way to contrive a situation over there would be if you know that the child knows where his shoes are kept or his jacket is, and you just hide it and you tell the child to go and wear his shoes because you're going out. And the child would promptly go to look for his shoes, and the moment he's looking for his shoes, there comes a moment where he realizes there are no shoes. That is the moment of teaching, because that's the point where there's a need. And at that point, we teach the child to say, where are my shoes? And they say, oh, I'm so sorry, I kept them away, or they're lying under the bag or something like that. And you retrieve the shoes and give the child the reinforcer, which is the shoes. So you're contriving a situation to teach a higher level man, which is demanding for information. I'll show you a video over here of contriving a situation to teach a child how to. I was contriving a situation to teach the child to ask who did something. Similarly, we contrive a situation to ask which one. So you're teaching the child to demand for information using various words, WH words, questions. This is the most important operant that is necessary to begin teaching children language development. It also takes care of a lot of problem behavior, because most of the problem behavior in children is about not being able to communicate what they want to say. So language defective mans are addressed if we work on man training from the very beginning. The next verbal operant is attacked. Attacked comes from the word contact. Tact is about labeling an item, an action, a person, or property of an item. So when we look at something or we hear something and we are in contact with something in our environment and we label it or talk about it, that is a tact. So if I'm going to talk about the weather while I'm not in contact with the weather outside, that would not be a tact. But if I talk about something that's in the room, that would be a tact. So when we are teaching a child a tact, then we are teaching the child also to respond to somebody else asking them a question about what do you see, what color is it, who's doing what, who is this person, etc. So we are teaching the child over here not to respond under motivation conditions, but to respond to somebody else asking them a question, and where they're responding by labeling in some way or the other. I would show you teaching tact with a child who is not vocal and who is a signer. I do want to mention over here that the trainers that you see in the videos have been trained in the last maybe anything between 3 months to 8 months. So they're very, very new trainers who have been, so they might be making some errors here and there in what you see in the videos, but I just want you to focus on the verbal operants over here. So teaching tact is about responding to a question coming from somebody else where the response is in the presence of the stimulus. It could be, so if I ask you what you hear, and you can hear a police, an ambulance going past, and you are saying that, oh, I can hear the ambulance going, that would be a tact, because you are in contact with the auditory stimulus. The reinforcement when you are using a tact or teaching a tact comes from the other person. It doesn't come from you getting the reinforcer, because there's no reinforcer. You never asked for a reinforcer. It's a question being asked by somebody else. So the reinforcer is mediated, socially mediated, by either giving an external reinforcer or by social praise. So the reinforcer is coming from socially mediated. This operant also helps in developing the speaker behavior as just like the mand. The third very critical verbal operant is classified as intraverbal. Intraverbal is a response which is made to words of others, where others are saying something, but there are no visual cues or any other cues which attend to your senses which are present. So when we talk about something that happened earlier or it's not present, we call that intraverbal behavior. So example, like if you ask the child, can you name a drink? Or what did you eat for lunch today? Or how was the movie that you went for yesterday? These are all intraverbal questions, because we're talking about what happened earlier and it's not present right now. If we look at adult conversation, if we look at our communication, how do we really communicate? Most of the time we are actually communicating between using the verbal operants of mand and intraverbal. We don't tact so much. We talk about things that happen to us. We talk about our experiences. We talk about things that we have learned from books or seen in pictures. We talk about intraverbal stuff, and we don't talk on our own. We need somebody else to talk to, so we demand for attention all the time. I mean, if you're talking to somebody and the other person is looking away, you don't want to talk. You become quiet. You get the person's attention, and then you talk about whatever you're talking about. And most of our conversation is about mand and intraverbal. However, our intraverbal comes from our tact. We have been exposed to pictures, we have been exposed to text, we have been exposed to information before we actually can talk about it when it's not present. So the three operants are all about expressive language, but they are very, very different from each other. So when we are planning a language program, we look at all three separately. You must have come across a lot of kids, vocal kids, who can rote answer so many things, and you can ask them names, you can ask them to label so many things, they can label everything. But you ask them name some fruits, they can answer 5 fruits. Put a couple of pictures and say give me all the fruits, they might not be able to give you the fruits. What does it mean? It means the intraverbal repertoire is fairly strong, but the tact repertoire is weak. Which means the child has rote learned, but you don't know whether the child understands what he is saying. So each operant has a huge significance in the language development. Intraverbals are also socially mediated because they are about answering other people's questions or communicating about something that you don't see, and it is developing speaker behavior and the language repertoire of the person. A fourth very different operant, verbal operant, is the echoic repertoire. And echoics are basically about repeating what has been heard. Echoic has point-to-point correspondence between what somebody else is saying and what you are saying. So we use echoics to teach children language. However, many children with autism, they don't have the echoic repertoire. So you ask them to say something, they won't say. So hinders their language development because they are not echoing at all. So this is a completely different verbal operant altogether, which we need to work on when we are teaching children with autism. Receptive. Receptive has got nothing to do with speaker behavior. It is about listener behavior. So when somebody asks you to do something and you do that, that's receptive language. Receptive language is extremely important in development of language because we understand a lot of things by hearing them. Whenever a student is asked to do something, go and bring me water, open the door, tidy up your room, that would be about receptive language. So we have over here 4 verbal operants which were about speaker behavior. There's one which is about listener behavior. However, in the verbal behavior taxonomy, they also talked about expanding the language of a child by teaching function features, FFCs, function features in class. So function is about talking about an item and its function. Feature would be talking about its parts or its features, and class would be about which group it belongs to. So when we are focusing on a language program which is so clearly, giving you guidelines on how to develop language, it helps the child to understand the language as a whole. And I'm not looking at autocratic right now, but textual is another way of developing language. There are a lot of children who can read, and we have learned so much and increased our language repertoire by reading. So textual reading words is another way of developing language. So when we are teaching a word like water, we teach the child to man for water, which means he understands when he needs water, he should be able to say, I want water. Should be able to tact water. So when you say, what is this? The child should be able to say, this is water. Should be able to respond intraverbally to the word water when you say, can you tell me something that you drink when you're thirsty? And the child says water. So he's using an intraverbal behavior over there. Should be able to echo water when you ask the child to echo water. Should be able to bring water when you ask the child to bring water. So that's the receptive language part. And should be able to do functions and features and class of water. So you say, okay, can you tell me something that you drink when you're thirsty? That's the function of water, to quench your thirst. Can you tell me something that's liquid and that's tasteless, and that's water? So that's the features of water. And finally, can you name a drink which is which we drink for quenching our thirst? And that would be again a class, a drink, a class to which water belongs. So now we really understand water as a word because we understand it across all operants. Plus we are able to read the word water and make sense out of it. So language then gets divided into these small parts where you're working on explaining the meaning to the child, and the child can then really understand what the word water means. Now, with children with autism, what happens is, you've all seen that there are some kids who can mand. who can ask for things, who can say, I want this, I want that. But their intraverbal may be weak, their receptive may be weak, their tact may be weak, their echoic may be weak. When we are doing verbal behavior, we try to transfer the stimulus control across one operand to the other so that the child can learn to very quickly, not just man but also tact. So we have a child here who can man for cycle. So whenever he wants to go on a bicycle ride, he'll say, I want bicycle. Okay, now but when you ask the child, what is this? He won't say it's a bicycle. So you do a man to tact transfer trial there to teach the child to use the word bicycle across two different operands. So the child says, I want bike, and you say, okay, what is this? And the child has already manned for bike. The possibility that the child will say bike again are pretty high, and that would be a transfer trial, transferring stimulus control from the man to the tact. Similarly, children who are not echoing, but they can manned, you can ask them to echo under a manned condition. So they say, okay, I want the bike, and you say bike, and the child says bike because the child wants bike really. But he might echo when you say bike, the child says bike again, and you say, wow, great, you can go and take your bike. So you're doing a transfer trial from one operand to the other to teach the child language across various operands. Similarly, there would be children who are echoic. They'll echo everything. They are not listening, they're not understanding. They'll just say everything, long sentences, 6-word sentences. So here we are using the echoic repertoire to transfer trial across the man tag, the intraverbal. So the child says park. So you say park, the child says park. And you say, where do you want to go? And the child says park again. That would be a transfer trial, or you prompt the child to say park again, and that would be a transfer trial from an echoic repertoire to a man repertoire. Or the child says park, and you say, what place is that? And the child echoes park. That would be a echoic to a tact transfer trial. And similarly, can you tell me a place where you have swings? And you prompt the child to say park, the child says park. You bring in the intraverbal component over there. So we use the child's strength, whatever verbal operant is strong for a particular child, to teach across various verbal operands. Similarly, for some children who can just label everything, they can't ask for things, but they can label everything. You say, what is this, what is this, what is this, what is this, they'll answer everything. But when they want something, they'll grab. So you do a tact to man transfer trial there, you do a tact to echoic transfer trial there, and you transfer trial across operands so that the child can use language again across all operands. So when we are teaching verbal behavior, did I show you? No, I think I didn't show you a video. I'll show you a video of child doing echoics. This is a very new trainer. He's just about 3 months in training, and the child has just started speaking. You saw him when he manned for push. So now, because he's just got the words, the trainer is so excited, so he's just getting all these echoic trials. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but I just want to show you how he's doing the echoics there. So that was working on the echoic, and this is a applied behavior analysis happening over there. The only difference is that we are looking at every verbal operant and working on them separately. So he's having fun, he's really enjoying, and he doesn't even know that there's teaching going on over there. He's just loving every bit of it. He thinks that he is in some fun school where they just play all the time. So when we are teaching verbal behavior, we use all the components of applied behavior analysis. We look at the motivation, we contrive situations for improving the motivation of the child. We use reinforcements. You saw the reinforcement of taking the child and spinning every time he made a response was reinforcement consequence after the behavior. We do discrimination training, we do discrete trial training, teaching on the tabletop, we do natural environment training. You saw all of that over there, where all the components of applied behavior analysis are being used to improve language. So basically, we follow the 4-term contingency, where the antecedent either has a motivating operation or it has a discriminative stimulus. So a motivating operation means there is going to be a manned condition, and the child is going to ask for something which you are ready to give to the child, as long as the child does something which is maybe ask for it appropriately. A discriminative stimulus would be when you're asking the child to tact, when you're asking the child to give an intraverbal response, when you're asking the child to do a receptive response, when you're asking the child to do an echoic. That is the discriminative stimulus. The antecedents are either the motivating operation or the ST. They lead to a behavior, and the behavior is always reinforced so that it can increase and the occurrence of the behavior. So we use a 4-term contingency over there. Now when we are teaching verbal behavior, when verbal behavior really started being practiced much more intensively around 1998, after Sandberg and Partington wrote that book, along with that we started practicing a lot of research based teaching methods, which have somewhere got associated with verbal behavior, but they really are not verbal behavior, they're part of applied behavior analysis. But most of us, when we are practicing verbal behavior, we use all these teaching procedures like errorless teaching, like fluency training. We do mixing and varying across various operands. We look at the pace of teaching that we need to adjust according to the child's ability. We do interspersing, hard and difficult, and we do a lot of transfer trials. So we're using a lot of teaching procedures which are evidence-based and which immediately show a difference in language acquisition in the child. What I would do over here is I would show you a concluding video which is using all the operands that we talked about just now, and how, I think other than a man, there's no man in this particular video, where the teacher is using all the operands. So that session actually had all the operands other than the man over there. And the man didn't happen because she was working for playing snakes and ladder. So she's collected all her tokens, after which she plays snakes and ladder. There was receptive, there was tact, there was intraverbal targets, there was imitation, there was no textual target over there, but she can read a lot, so we didn't have that over there. But most of the operands that we have were there on the targets specifically. When we talk about verbal behavior, it's important for us to discriminate between vocal and verbal. Vocal does not mean verbal. A child may be vocal but may not be verbal. So a child has speech and language but may not use any of the verbal operands. However, a child may be verbal but not be vocal. And this child would be somebody who doesn't have vocals but is communicating by signs or by pictures. So we do need to differentiate between vocal and verbal when we are working with children with autism. I think, I think I've quickly gone through all the verbal operands, and just thought that if we work on in a very focused manner, selecting every I don't know. Okay. Selecting every operand in the language target and focusing on each one of them to expand the language, then it just becomes so much easier. And when I started, I was doing the receptive and expressive thing, and for children who didn't have speech, it was very, very hard because you were stuck, you didn't know what to do with them, so you just went on with the receptive program forever. But when verbal behavior, I understood the various verbal operands, and as long as the child was communicating using some form of communication across the verbal operands, it just became so much easier to expand the language repertoire of the child. I'll close over here. Thank you so much for your time.